I'd like to introduce Browne, who's the Director of Education here at CAI. He's been instrumental in leading the organisation's transition to digital assessments, modernising exam delivery with a focus on improving security and efficiency. He brings experience from both academia and finance, making him a key player in the integration of technology in education. So give him a warm round of applause.
Thanks very much. Hiya, Ian Browne, Director of Education, Chartered Accountants Ireland. The artist formerly known as the Head of Assessment and Syllabus at Chartered Accountants Ireland, and before that I was unemployed. I know I had jobs, right? PJ, I was supposed to go on first. I'm really sorry. I was at an audit risk and finance board, which actually turns out it was, and I had a just-in-time policy. I was standing there a minute before I was due to go on, and it's just, we were a little bit ahead, so I apologise to everyone. It's not a disrespect thing. I spent a lot of the time travelling in the last while, and disrespect's a big thing, so I'm really sorry for being only 1 minute early, and then therefore being late. But it's actually probably a good thing, because what I'm going to talk to you, or had planned to talk to you about this morning, which now is, I'm not going to talk to you about, is the greatest hits from 6 years ago. So I was going to talk to you about the future today. But actually with PJ's stuff, which we haven't really fully announced yet, what we're doing right now, which is our Project Athena, which is all about for the future of the profession in terms of what we need to teach, but to PJ's point, how we teach it. And I know we have the Chair of the Education Board here today, Michael Chauvelin. Thank you for coming, Michael, who's been instrumental over the last few years of driving us, helping us on that journey. 6 weeks ago, we turned on the first generative AI adaptive learning module for the accountancy profession globally for 3 subjects at a pilot, and then we're rolling that out for the rest of the qualification over the next 3 years. That is a complete transformation of how we do. We already have about 2,000 students have already gone through most of it now within that 6 weeks. And in terms of if you're afraid of Gen AI or anything like that, for what we've just done for the last 6 weeks, if we were not to use Gen AI, to help us on that journey, it would have taken us 10 years to do that bit. By the time we do it, our syllabus is 10 years out of date. The accountancy profession is moving so fast right now that we actually have to stay up with the profession, so that just won't work. So literally, if we don't embrace this thing, that's fine, no issue. We'll just be extinct. So it is literally that stark a reality right now. So the Institute here at Chartered Accountants Ireland have invested significantly over the next 3 years of rollout project to develop and roll out the future of all education in terms of what we do, which is a complete transformation of what we do. I won't get into the big pieces about that, but I kind of feel like that's the album we're about to release, but nobody wants to listen to the songs off that because they want to hear what we did 6 years ago. So this is kind of what we did 6 years ago, and we've been doing ever since in terms of the assessment side. And the reason why we did that first was because at the time the artist formerly known as the Head of Assessment and Syllabus didn't have, that was my jurisdiction, so this is the place that we enjoyed to play around with, and members of the team that actually worked on that are here today as well, thanks. So people thought about e-assessment in terms of that happened because of COVID. It did for most other professional accountancy bodies around the world, but we were the first here at Chartered Accountants Ireland to get full regulatory approval to do it pre-COVID. And I'm going to talk to you about the reasons why we were doing it pre-COVID over anyone else. And it's actually, it's a really sad story actually, but anyway, we'll go through it. The challenges faced that we then had a response for what we did for COVID, software developments that we worked with our partner Cirrus, which we're really proud partners of. And I have to say, in the 6 years since we met, if we were thinking about a relationship, we're still going steady, right? It's like, wasn't a flash in the pan, still going steady. What people say matters. And I'll tell you why, because I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for 2 partners that we had. One, obviously the team that's here, that goes without saying, but our external partners, and the team would all agree on this. ProctorU, which was the online remote invigilation software that we use still to this day, and Cirrus, which was the exam platform that underpinned that. Without that, I'm not standing here as Director of Education today. I would be literally back working at Santa in the local super value. But I did enjoy that job when I had it, right? So this piece here, why did we change pre-2020? Because being the world's laziest person, I don't change unless I really, really need to. The problem we had was we were growing, and I just came from the Audit and Finance Board where we were just reporting, and I was told, don't say that, right? This year as a professional accountancy body, we've been growing steadily when all the other professional bodies around the world have been shrinking, having revenue going. Some are doing well, but in our profession, we're doing really, really well. So this year, we're actually going to have double-digit growth, which is exceptional in a market that's shrinking worldwide. So the issue we had, and anyone who's here is in academic exam halls, that's the RDS Simmons Court. That is basically a stables for the RDS, really. So the month before we used to move in, that was full of horses, and it smelled like horses when you're doing your exam. So that was what the good old days looked like. And except they charged that as a dedicated exam venue. And I'll tell you now when it was July 2018, they got a new accountant out in the RDS, and he worked previously for EY, right? So anyone from EY? Yeah, come on, Michael, right, okay, so let's be careful now. He previously worked for EY trained, and we sent in to chart. We'd been using them since 1888 to run exams, right? So not that long, we're a good customer. Still going steady with them at that stage, and they jacked up the fees for that dedicated exam venue by 40 to 60%, depending on whether we were in the stable side or the main hall in the RDS, overnight. So the team here, Audrey, Nikki, and Sonia, and myself, traipsed down, look at the quote for next year. We can't afford that. So we went down and said, look, we're with you for 130 years, like you jacked the price. The accountant who was new wouldn't speak to us. So all the successes that come after this is mainly because the accountant who was EY trained in the RDS, who had just taken his new job, wouldn't actually come down to meet us. Because we had to then think of a different way because we'd risk exposure. And that's the truth, isn't it? That's the way it happened. That was July 2018. And then we also had in May 2018, the world's greatest hits for Europe. And you can thank for script access, right? Script access, so the student all over Europe is entitled to their script, happened here in this place here, right? This hallowed ground of CA House. We had one of our students challenged it all the way to the European Court of Justice. And anyway, can't get into that for legal reasons, right? But suffice to say, every script across the entirety of Europe is now accessible. And we had 6,000 students who had a right to get their script. And in paper, that's a nightmare. So we had a couple of conflicting problems. And the last one, reasonable accommodations. Everyone who's involved in education knows that's going one way. The previous 3 years, it had gone 400% increase in the amount of people looking for reasonable accommodations. What was that? One was we need to be in a room on our own in the RDS. Now, accountant man getting really excited now at this stage, right? Individual rooms, which were basically like, I won't say what they were. It wouldn't be worth the money you were spending for them. Let's say that, right? But we couldn't get enough of those individual rooms. So now you were actually taking out other places all over Dublin because we had so many people that needed a room on their own. And the other thing they needed was a laptop. In general, there were other things as well, right? But let's just say 80% of all our reasonable accommodations were because of that. So in the words of the movie Jaws, for many reasons, we're going to need a bigger boat, right? That's what happened, right? So then we go, okay, what are we going to do? Hadn't a clue. So we said we have to think outside the box anyway. So then we said, look, we have to go for a complete paradigm shift, which Gen AI right now, to PJ's point, is that, right? This was a paradigm shift for us. Luckily enough, we started this journey 2 years before COVID. So when COVID hit, we had already started our journey. So the danger of what had happened with COVID, there was a never let a good crisis go to waste. So we had a project plan to actually turn this in our favor. We had a 3-year project plan to roll out all of our exams in a phased, de-risked way. And we'd started in 2019 with 10% of our exams. Then March hit. Then we had to go 100%. So that 3-year project timeline got reduced into 3 months. Now, to be fair to Cirrus and ProctorU, but Cirrus is for the functionality of the platform, there was a small team of people in Cirrus, and there was a small team of people here. So when we talk about the art of the possible, Jesus, do I need huge resource? Do I need, like, this is going to be forever? And by the way, the unions are going to be given out because there's so much change, right? This got done. The reason why there's a small digger with a big bucket, we had a lot of digging to do and a lot of ground to move, but with a very, very small engine of people. That did happen. We were able to achieve that. Now, to get then to take 3 years and condense it into 3 months, when we partnered up with Cirrus, now, forgive me, Cirrus, for saying this, right? But I'm going to say it because it's the truth. When we met Cirrus in September 2018, we walk into Utrecht's offices and we see the platform that you had at that time, and the platform couldn't do what we needed. Now, Michael, Chair of Education Board, we have to close the ears now for this bit, right? The system that we actually went to Chartered Accountants Ireland to say, this is the system, when we met them, it couldn't do what we needed it to do. But we still picked them. Because we did a macro environmental scan of what was out there at the time, and I still passionately believe that this is the case today. Everywhere we went, we asked to people who were doing e-assessment, much more established, can it do this? And what we decided was, if we could do it for somebody who had a reasonable accommodation, well, then it's easy to do it for everyone else. So that was our patient zero. Solve for X, and then you can do it for everything else. Everywhere we went, you remember Little Britain? Computer says, no, we can't do that. You have to adjust your exam methodology to suit our platform. I'm sorry, we're in a regulated organization, we're a regulated membership body. We couldn't do that without dumbing down our standards. Now, other accountancy bodies had gone computerized exams, right? I'm not here to defend the faith, right? But I'd been involved with CIMA and ACCA prior to coming here, and their exam platforms, anyone who knows, they actually changed how you actually had to do. You couldn't do an income statement and balance sheet anymore, for example, in its entirety. You could only do one section of it. So the whole exam methodology was compressed to suit the technology that was there, and then a brownfield site. So we went in and we kept asking somebody, we're not settling for that. And the only people at the time in 2018, out of dozens of conversations, that actually says, yes, we will work with you to develop the tailored piece that you need, was Cirrus. But we had a staged 3-year plan. So what we decided was, do you know, like when you buy a new house, you don't have to do the whole house. Like I just bought a house last year, and you don't have to do all the house in the one day, right? So you might do the sitting room for the housewarming, but upstairs, like, there's nothing, right? But when people come to see the housewarming, at least you have a decent table and chairs and all that. So we were going to build as we go, and we had a solid timeline, not thinking like something was going to happen. Then we had the call where this is now April 2020, and we say our roadmap needs to be quickened up. So then we had decisions to make. We couldn't do all this, it's prioritization. So we did all that to get the functionality in August 2020 that we needed to go live. Sorry, Michael, for you to hear this, right? Because you can never unhear what you're going to hear next, right? Some of the functionality was delivered, right? I want to say days before we ran the exams. Do you remember I was a minute early outside, just in time? It was just in time. Because, see that marking bit at the end? When we did the CAP 2 exams that summer, right, we had agreement with all the firms, people don't need to see the bit that's swimming under the water. It upsets them. To keep it nice and steady, right? The gig was the marking aspect of that. When we had students sit the CAP 2 exams, the marking software couldn't actually mark the exam. But we knew, because we trusted our partners, because they said, it will be there when you go to marking centre. So it got switched on the morning before we started marking. Now that's just in time, but now you don't roll it. Nobody go and do that at home, right? You're not going to, that's not career enhancing, right? That was because we had to. Now we've subsequently then developed other stuff. in terms of the Microsoft 365 integration, and auto-scoring formats, which doing income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, variance analysis, all of that can be auto-scored. So you can speed up the time that your results comes back. And then the AI marking piece with Please AI, which they'll be here later on to talk about, which and the reason why we did that, and you think we had a lot going on in 2020, we actually worked with Cirrus and Please AI to get funding for a project on AI marking at the end of 2020. We're knackered. Right? We've just done a big shift. But that was the first time that we actually had 1,600 regulated exams in a digital format, which you need to train the AI. So it was being in the right place at the right time. So we said, feck it, we'll go with it. And literally within about 9 months back then, so now this is 2021. That's ages ago. This is not like yesterday. In 2021, the AI for the marking, which people talk about later on, just so everyone knows, when we trained it, the first and second iteration of it, we were like what PJ is saying, I was shocked, right? You were shocked. I was shocked in the results we got back. So we've 130 years of experience of running human-based marking centres. So what we did was we marked it, and then we took all the use cases and then ran AI over it. The AI was 92%. Now, in case you think, you obviously use a simple exam. No, we decided to pick the hardest one, FEE Core, which is a completely integrated case study across about 4 or 5 different subject matter areas. FR, audit, tax, strategy. So it wasn't binary stuff. It was a big case study, 4.5-hour case study. It's the hardest thing you could have marked. Everything is in it. So we run it through the thing, and we think it's going to spit out 60% accuracy. Good luck, sure, we'll try again some other time, right? On the first iteration, it's 85% accurate. Now, you go, 85? That's not great. 85% accurate when you're marking 1,600 scripts in a marking centre. Your best markers with the examiner, that's what, from a regulated standpoint, that's what good looks like, right? It's really hard to do that over multiple weekends and keep to that level of convergence. So then we said, what? So we'll try it again. We'll train it a little bit more. We'll put more stuff in and we train it. We got it up to 92, 93% accuracy. Bobby the bot, as we called him, he's changed. He's woke now. It's a she. And that's actually a true story, but that's not for today. Bobby the bot back then in the marking centre gets trained again, gets that level of accuracy. To give you an idea, we were thinking if Bobby might be able to hold his own in the marking centre. Bobby actually became the most accurate marker in the marking centre to the examiner. But then it comes down to arbitrations. When there's a divergence in the bit that's left, the tail, the human mark and the AI mark is greater than 1 or 2 marks. What happens then? I won't do a survey because I got it totally wrong, so I'm assuming most people get it wrong. Gig here was 9 times out of 10, when we actually looked and got the examiner then to make the call, who was right? The human who marked it first versus the actual machine. 9 out of 10 times the machine got it right in the arbitrations. That was 2021. So when Blease come here to talk to you today, there's 3 years more training that's gone into that piece of software. Now, we use it as a QA function now, because from a regulatory standpoint, I don't want anyone going home not able to sleep tonight thinking they're all just marking AI here and chartered. We're not. It's been used as a QA mechanism to say, look, to make sure that our markers are actually aligned. And the FRC and IASA really love that because it's another assurance within the system. And it's kind of a free one. And it's really good. So we had all of those developments happening back then to get us to market. Very quickly, one thing not to overlook is the student resources that you need to get in, because here's the gig. It's one thing to go online, it's another thing to get it be successful. The more upstream work you do, the better. Back in 2018, nobody was doing it, so we couldn't go to somebody else and say, what's this experience like for you? How's it working? Can we take your processes? And because trust me, we tried. We literally, like as I said to you, lazy, right? Go find somewhere else, rebrand, that's okay, I'm okay with that. We couldn't, so what we did was we started to go, look, what would we have to do? So we had to put up a whole information hub on our website, practice tests so if people could get familiar with the functionality of the assessment. Without doing that, guess what the stat says there? Students who did engage with practice tests versus those who hadn't, the difference in mark was 18 marks. Not 18% of a difference, 18 marks of a difference. Why? Because you spend too much time trying to figure out what button gets to where, how do you... So familiarity with the system means time within the system to answer more effectively. They need to do those, they need to do some mock exams. So all of that was built in. And then a practice onboarding. And at the time, it was like, that's overkill. But anyone who's operating e-assessment knows you do the practice onboarding now a month before, you find out all the people who are going to have difficulty on the exam day, because if you don't, you won't get the results you want on the exam day. The supports that go around that, we built a whole team in terms of people feeding in to how the workflows we have for running the exam day. And the great news is, on an exam day now, I probably am the least effective person in that mix, because it's a process and it just works. Everyone knows their place in it, and there's a hierarchy. And to give you an idea, when we have 2,000 students taking an exam on the same time in the same day, we actually can preempt most of their issues, but like the response time for us as a team to actually get to somebody to help them if they're having problems is like less than a minute. It's probably closer to 30 seconds. The worst thing that we find is if they actually get through to the helpline of our third-party provider. We actually try to get out of the blocks quicker to stop them from being involved with them. Because why? Because we can control the process and fix it a lot quicker than they can. So what's happened subsequently, we've had 150,000 plus, that keeps changing every month, regulated exams. 100% of people getting into the exam. That's not 98% rounded up, that's 100%. Now that's thanks to the tenacity and the commitment of a team of people. And we talked about this, Jerry, before, the Scrum mentality. Like if we have on an exam day, now this is the top tier here, the 3 people sitting here, and under that there's another 20 or 30, right? That's a good day actually, right? So, but we've a lot of people, and if one person collapses that scrum, we all lose. So everyone is going into it with that mentality, gets us to that 100%. This piece here with Cirrus, we won an e-assessment award in 2021. Which is kind of ironic, right? I want to tell you this story because I think it's funny. You'll laugh at it, right? This is the story of my life, how a mirage happens and it gets pulled away from you just at the wrong time, right? But unfortunately, it happened for the entire team. We win that award in May 2021 for the most transformative project in e-assessment worldwide across all forms of education, not just accounting. But in April 2021, because there's a few people in here, the fact checkers, right? Because there's probably a Trump meter over here going, yeah, most of what he said is crap, right? But the truth is, in April 2021, that is correct, we did have an exam outage failure. This was, the panels went through the judging and adjudication of this in March 2021. So there was an embargo on the announcement. The problem was, when we won that award, we just spent the previous 2 weeks, 2 days on Joe Duffy, going, Joe, you know, and funny enough, here's an interesting stat for you, because I never got the right reply on that, right? Because you can't. Because you go on Joe Duffy, you're explaining you're losing, right? So here goes, right? Of all the people that rang into Joe Duffy, do you know how many of them were students? One person was genuine, but Joe never actually ended up speaking to them. One of them was another educational provider who really did. He had lots to say about it, even though he didn't do an exam. Didn't know anyone that had actually done an exam, right? But and then a lot of the other people were sort of, well, Joe, and right, sure, that's awful, like terrible, that's what that is, right? Oh, Jesus, right? Did all that Joe did, right? But never said, so what he did in a few cases, so who was it that you knew, right? It's 2 doors down, like their door. And like there's literally a public outcry, right? Now, to be fair, there's like, there but for the grace of God, any of us, and you don't want to be there, right? So that's why that has to work 100% of the time. Now, we were doing that anyway, but it was a piece that was out of our control. And it wasn't, per se, anyone's fault, but when you're breaking new ground, God, I've talked about Trump, now I'm going to talk about Rumsfeld. unknown unknowns, okay? Now there's very few of them for us because we've been 6 years in the journey. Back then, there was unknown unknowns. Well, this was actually a known kind of piece, but it was so edge case that we didn't, like, anyway, long story, I won't get into it. But we couldn't actually mitigate for that. So it was the worst case. It was a Challenger shuttle disaster kind of scenario for us, right? Since that's all been resolved and we have everything's known in our system, we've never had an outage. That thing balance over there is about, from a regulatory standpoint, if you introduce all of the tech, if this stuff goes wrong, you lose your job. So to give you an idea, we have a global accounting alliance that we're a part of, which is about 7 or 8 charter bodies from around the world. It's like the premier division, right? Since COVID, I'm one of the only ones, maybe the only one, education director that's still in situ, because the rest all have bad implementations of e-assessment strategies. They're no longer working in their jobs. A bad implementation of this is bad, but you get it right, it's really good, and we're unlocking a lot of benefits now for that, which will lead to the future of our educational offering as well. But we had to have achieved balance. The average mark went up a little bit. Why? People can type more than they can write over a 4-hour period. But people went, oh, but if they could type 25% more, surely they'd get, like, the average mark's going to shoot up. No, it turns out if you're, like, at a certain level of intelligence, with an extra 20 minutes of typing, you don't actually suddenly get that much more brighter, all right? But what happens is your pass rates, anyone who actually has worked on pass rates, you see, the pass rate was 80%, but the average mark was 45%. That's an extremely volatile 80%, right? So all that's happened is our volatility has reduced and our pass rates have remained broadly the same. Pre-COVID, exam paper and quill, since the time of Queen Victoria, to now digitized exams. All bar one headbanger, who complained, right? That's all we've ever had. One person really came at it and challenged it, and they're now they have a wonderful career in marketing. They're not in the accountancy world anymore. It wasn't for them, but they were using this as a reason to fight what was going on in their own piece, right? It wasn't on us. Balance, achievement, the regulator sleeps well at night. I don't have to go back to work as Santa in the local super value. The world is good. So if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you.
Any questions? Yep, Ella.
Anyway, in the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about test centers.
Yep.
So recently, I've read a few articles about this, actually myself, without ChatGPT helping me. I actually read them. And there's a lot of conversation going on about test centers and going back to test centers, and even some of the educational institutions talking about going back to paper. So I just really want to hear your opinion about this. What do you think about this, movement?
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Are you talking within professional bodies or all bodies? All bodies, that's fine. To PJ's point earlier on, in academia, what do you get measured on, PJ? What's your KPIs to, like you said some of them earlier on, around publications? Is it around teaching, or what's the innovations you've brought to the table in terms of how you educate people or assess them? Are you KPI'd on that as much as the...
Well, actually, I'm going to totally wimp out of this question and give the mic to somebody who will know the answer.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Jay.
It's collaboration here, right?
How many hours are you lecturing this semester? Ask me again, Ian, because I...
So, like, for example, right? So here's the gig. So I'll talk about the professional bodies because I know that game really well. I'd be a fraud if I stood up here and started talking about academia, right? Whilst I worked in it for a little while, but it was a little while in between the Santa job, right? So the gig here is in academia. So say Christine, on a day job, your key KPIs for what you need to do to stay within the system and retain tenure and not lose your job is to do X, Y, and Z. What part of that is forcing you to actually embrace new technologies in the way you educate or the way you assess students, right? That's number one. So what I'm trying to say is, because you do in a really ill-planned implementation, this goes badly wrong for you. You've introduced all of that risk into your ecosystem, and here we had control over all the levers. In academia, you have an exam operations team that's over here somewhere else, and they're an academic team, and everyone has to work together on a project. So is that part of your annual, so do you do well for taking that in on yourself, that level of risk?
Taking in the risk around exams in particular.
Yeah, if we just take exams in a
I
row.
address this a little bit when I'm speaking, but unfortunately, the measure is output. As PJ said, rightly or wrongly, more wrongly, the measure is how many have you produced, which isn't how we should be doing it.
Yeah.
And I address a little bit some of your question around that exam centre and the quill and pen and the student experience on that. But no is the answer to your question, in that we aren't sufficiently concentrating on the quality of what we are delivering, and instead it is the throughput.
Yep. And then there's you have to go and look for a budget to go and take this on as a project and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So,
And we're in public education.
yeah, no, that's correct, yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we're not for profit, but we keep saying it's not for loss as well. But in terms of the other point, right, Ella, you asked around the professional bodies. So what happened was, in 2020, we were 2 years ahead of all our under professional body colleagues. So all the ones now that don't work as directors of education anymore, okay? And what happened was, and there's some people sitting here in the auditorium today know this, because we were a little bit ahead, when a crisis happened, actually more than half of my time in 2020 was actually talking to colleagues from other bodies. And what we did was we actually, and if somebody wants to stand up, fact check, excuse me, that's wrong, right? I'm okay with that, right? So we're all grown-ups. I actually spent about half of my time onto other bodies all over the world and gave our implementation plan and said, these are our providers, here's the pitfalls, here's what happens, because there, but for the grace of God, go any of us. And the way I was reared is you better be helping somebody if you can. Because if I didn't, my mother still has the wooden spoon. And she tells me every day, Kathleen says, I'll use it. And she also says every day, if you brought me up in another presentation, I'll kill you. But that's right. So we reached out. That's what Irish people are good at. We used to be really good at it anyway when I was growing up. There's such thing as a really good, strong community. And we've loads of colleagues here today, and we gave that. Now, some of those colleagues, the reason they're still sitting here is because it worked for them. But in other jurisdictions, what happened was they didn't embrace the Scrum mentality. Because if culturally you're not set up for that, right? And you have, look, just leave it at that. For culturally you're not set up for it, I don't want to get into the detail, is it will fail, even though you were given the implementation plan that produces that. Why? Do you know what happens? Because every one of them came as they were losing their jobs, said, thanks very much, I lost my job over doing that. And I says, okay, let's sit down and have a chat about that then. And say, there was the plan, show me all the bits that you implemented. Oh, we did most of these, and that bullet point there. I was actually stopped in Cape Town one day. Imagine that. I was given out in Cape Town. And I said, show me the plan. Well, you left that bit out. Yeah, but that was to save a 50 cent an exam. Okay. But why was it there on our pre-flight checks? How many pre-flight checks have we? We have a big page of them or 2 pages of them. They're all there. When you start taking, so would you fly with an airline tomorrow that suddenly the pilot decided before he took off? Do you know what? There's a pre-flight check that Airbus and Boeing have said you follow them to the end, then we take off. Every one of them, when I went down through their implementation plan, at least 2 or 3 or 4 of those bullet points were taken away. Now, there's similarity to Toyota in that. Toyota, when they had, now they can't say it anymore. If you notice, they don't say anymore, Toyota, the best built cars in the world. Because they can't legally. But there was a time they could legally say. And what did Toyota do? Because I have people on the staff here who were in that business who now work for us here. They actually were flown out to Tokyo to sit down and go through all the factories of this is how we make the best built cars in the world. And the reason why we at Toyota will actually show BMW and we will show Mercedes how we build cars and every process we use is because we know you're not going to be able to replicate. Why? Because you don't have our culture. You know? Do you have TQM as a culture baked in? Do you have all sorts of other pieces? And that's what we did as well. Like, and in terms of, there you go, we would help you, but follow the plan. And then, and the problem is then, when there's bad so here's another one. Success has many fathers. Failure's an orphan. How many people do you think successfully rolled out e-assessment in Chartered Accountants Ireland in April 2020 when Talk to Joe? How many people actually then were involved? It got very small, very quick, right? Now it builds up momentum again. The point being is when that goes wrong, it'll bring a lot in on top of you. And they experience that. So then they blame the provider. And I know in one case where they specifically blamed the provider, and it wasn't the provider's fault. But that's a good narrative in your governance structures, rather than I actually dropped off some of the checklists.
Ian, I'm going to ask you one more question, so we'll break then for a coffee break. Ian's going to be joining us for a panel discussion afterwards. But you mentioned about the unknowns when you were starting this like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Where you are now with e-assessment, are there still unknowns, or have that been kind of stopped?
To be honest with you, I would say, look, so how we know is how many extra things get added to the pre-flight checklist. There's not a load of stuff getting added to the pre-flight checklist now. So the fact check there is the no's are going this way, right? So so it's a no, right? We don't have extra ones added in. But we're gluttons for punishment here, as I said. Our latest album that's coming out, and you're going to love it when you hear it, there's some cool tunes on it, and all of that new stuff, we're back to a load of unknown unknowns because nobody's charted that. So we're going through that exciting journey at the moment and trying to make sure. Now, we've learned a lot from tech implementation, so we're encountering less things when we go. So it's like everything, it's muscle memory. The more you do something, the better you get at. So yeah, but to be fair, I know I've painted both sides of the picture, the positive and the negative. Trust me, if you do it right, it's completely transformational, and it can be done right. And to give you an idea, there was 4 of us here, Sonia, Audrey and Nikki, that were central to the rollout here, right? There was 1 or 2 others, but that's it, right? And the good news is none of us knew anything about what we were doing before we went into it. But now we know, so we learn as you go. And that's like for any team, but it doesn't take, we don't have PhDs. We're not like super intelligent or anything like that. It's just, but we have tenacity.
Speak for yourself, Ian. As the ladies are saying.
Well, I think you'd all say that. They're all humble enough, aren't you? Exactly.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to
Thank
leave it there because we're going to have tea and coffee. But as I said, Ian will be joining us for the panel discussion afterwards. So thanks once more.